IB Geography Water Management Features Part 3 Wetlands and the Kissimmee River. So, a wetland is a land with soil that is permanently flooded. Some types would be marshes, swamps, bogs, and fens. But you don't necessarily have to know these in detail. But just know that there are many types of wetlands. So we have three main wetland functions. We can divide these functions basically into three subcategories. They're kind of like the importance of wetlands, so to say. So, wetlands are natural resources, for example, for timber and peat. They're very important for tourism and leisure. These activities include like bird watching, fishing, hunting, etc. They're important because they're a resource for direct human use. So this is basically fish for eating, water for drinking, just the necessities of human life. And they're important as a transport network. They provide many natural waterways that people can move around easily. Provision of habitats. So they're very important for biodiversity and the flora and fauna. So they include many unique species and ecological niches. And they're quite unique habitats for different species like aquatic plants, rare reptile species, migratory birds come to nest, etc. So they play a big role in the biodiversity. They're significant for the groundwater recharge. So because they collect large areas of precipitation and river discharge, this water that is held in the wetland as a storage percolates into the groundwater, and it basically recharges the groundwater. And they are storages of organic matter, which is carbon, methane, etc. So if they were to be artificially drained, there is a risk of this organic matter to go up to the atmosphere and eventually cause global warming. Then they regulate and protect many things, such as water quantity. So what do I mean by water quantity? Wetlands are great water storages, and this is how they basically act as a natural flood control mechanism. So because they are covered in vegetation, which intercepts the precipitation, so rainwater can percolate into the ground with a long lag time. If you remember from river hydrographs, more vegetation led to a longer lag time, so less risk of flood. This is what basically wetlands do. And they control erosion. I mean, if we explain this in detail, I'd say because there's a lot of, again, like forestation, vegetation, etc. This creates some kind of a something to hold on to for the soil, so there's less erosion. Then they stabilize the shoreline. So basically, a wetland is kind of like a protective frontal layer of a shoreline before the sea. They stabilize the shoreline, and they regulate water quality. So they detoxify the water from toxins, pollutants, etc. So this also is significant for drinking water. Then some factors that cause pressure on wetlands. So because there's an increased demand on agricultural land due to population growth, of course there's an increased demand for food, and wetlands have to be artificially drained to make room for this agricultural land. Population growth in general is a factor that highly affects the wetlands negatively. Urbanization causes more demand for housing, and this can pollute the wetlands. Sea level rises due to global warming drown the wetlands in the sea. River flow changes due to channelized and straightened rivers, drained rivers, dams, polluted and redirected rivers. Basically, all actions artificially caused by humans alter the river flow. Land reclamation, pollution in general really affects the ecosystem of the wetland, and this is very important because of the ecological niches that they consist of. And infrastructure projects such as roads, airports, and railways lead to drained wetlands to make room for these projects. Alien species invasion, so basically species that aren't normally supposed to be in that ecosystem, can disrupt food webs and the ecosystem. And also tropical storms. Although wetlands can be natural defenses for tsunamis or tropical storms, they can also be damaged by them. And freshwater wetlands can be flooded by storms, especially tropical storms really affect the wetlands. Wetlands and climate change. So because sea levels are rising globally, this has a severe effect on wetlands, especially in small islands, low-lying areas such as Bangladesh and many others. So due to sea levels rising, there's an increase of coastal erosion. Increase of coastal erosion is due to clear water erosion. Increased coastal flooding, just in general when the sea levels rise. Loss of habitats due to the drowning of the habitat of the specific species. So this also leads to a loss of freshwater biodiversity. Although the flora and fauna have a certain ability to adapt to changes, if these changes are so radical that they cannot adapt anymore, biodiversity is lost. Change tidal ranges, change in transport of sediments and nutrients, change in patterns of contamination. Contamination is presence of impurity. So basically there are more toxins also. Increased salinity of water, eventually the groundwater. So this advances inland and affects agriculture mainly. Also domestic and industrial use, but agriculture is most affected by the salinity of water. Then there's a convention called the Ramsar Convention. It's basically an international treaty to conserve wetlands, and its main goal is to sustainably utilize the wetlands and the wise use of wetlands.